Welcome, unkindled one, purloiner of cinders.
Salutations everyone, thanks for tuning in to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 hardest bosses in Dark Souls 3. I'll be ranking them based upon how I handled them in my first playthrough, as that's obviously where I struggled the most. So let's get right into it with the Twin Princes at number 5. Let me just say I absolutely love the Twin Princes. The royal yet tragic music, the ambiance, the feels between the two brothers, they're no doubt my favorite boss in the main game. But my first time around, I had the hardest time with timing my dodges against Lorien and choosing whether or not to attack, since I always struggled to see whether or not Lorien would follow up, teleport, and then be on top of me again within the blink of an eye, or if he would just attack once, sit there, let me hit him a few times before blinking half the room away. He would often play pinball with me right as I would scramble to heal. Lothric would poop on my day, finishing with a magic attack, not to mention that supercharged Holy Slam that you need to dodge perfectly or your health will be demolished. Even if you roll right behind Lorien as he finishes it, he'll whack you with a follow-up to make sure you're not feeling too proud of yourself. Definitely a struggle my first go around, but no doubt one of my all-time favorite fights in the Souls series. Coming in at number 4, we have the final boss of the Ringed City DLC, Slave Knight Gale. While the Twin Princes are my favorite main game boss, Slave Knight Gale goes down as my favorite boss in any Souls DLC, even edging out the legendary Knight Artorias from Dark Souls 1. Not only is this fight an endurance fight due to the massive health pool, but the first phase of this fight is wild and erratic with attacks that are delayed, well telegraphed, and impossible to see follow-ups alike that can easily kill you in 2 hits even with silly amounts of vigor like I tend to play with. The only thing that makes this part of the fight easier to get through is how easy to punish some of those well-telegraphed attacks I mentioned. Even his 5-hit combo. Start rolling after he yells, much like Manners from Dark Souls 1, and keep your rhythm until he jumps in the air, rolling behind him from the punish. Upon knocking down a third of his health, the real fight begins. Now I actually find avoiding Gale's attacks easier in this phase by sticking to his left side, but even now I still find it seriously annoying trying to avoid the follow-up from his cape. Come on, it's a cape, it shouldn't hurt you that badly. Not to mention the repeating crossbow that isn't too hard to avoid, but if you stop and heal, that crossbow will be sure to negate whatever essence you try to drink by demolishing your health for standing still for even a few seconds while under fire. It was super annoying at first, but looking back I think it's a brilliant touch to add even more of an edge to this already brilliant fight. Upon knocking down his health even further, Gale will start to spew with the power of the Dark Soul and become even more aggressive, and leap at you, constantly slamming his sword in your face. 1, 2, 3 times, very much in an Artorias fashion, all while his cape and crossbow are still simultaneously attempting to ruin your day. And on top of that, there's fucking lightning and shit raining from the sky. Talk about an epic finale to the series. While I don't have much trouble dealing with all this on consecutive playthroughs, this was a plate chock full of chaos that took me forever to learn how to deal with, and I was absolutely exhilarated upon conquering this all at World's End.
Yes! 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 Woo!
Up next, we have who was once among the most overhyped bosses in all of Dark Souls 3, and for good reason during my first playthrough. The Nameless King kicked my ass left, right, and center for hours on end in my first playthrough for 2 reasons. 1, that fucking dragon breath. Seriously, fuck that dragon and the camera battle that comes with him. 2, I suck at dodging his delayed attacks. Plain and simple. Most of the King's attacks are telegraphed super generously, but for me that just meant super delayed attacks for which I could dodge way too soon just to stand up into one of his attacks. Or, he'll be slamming his weapon in my face in the blink of an eye after a really long slow wind up, and a huge chunk of my health bar will be gone. Being that the King is also an endurance fight, it was a nightmare for me to outlast him in my first playthrough due to how bad I was at dodging his attacks and how aggressive and greedy I was. That didn't help either. But eventually, after learning the timings of his attacks and keeping my greed in check, this guy was a cakewalk.
Fret not, Father. We have no need of thy flail. 'Tis only the flame quivering at misguided ash. Please avert thine eyes. I will snuff out these ashes for good.
Up next, we have the reason for most of the dents in the wood of my desk and lack of functionality in my previous controller, who I thought would always be at the top of my difficulty list until number 1 came along, and that is Sister Fried. When I first fought Sister Fried, I could tell there wouldn't only be one phase, because this is Dark Souls after all. Her delayed wind-ups followed by ridiculously fast attacks in Phase 1 were an absolute nightmare for me to handle. Not to mention how I never seemed to know how to lock onto her when she went invisible to track her in midair. That made it 100 times worse, but it was 100% my fault for not locking on like a dumbass. The second phase of this fight initially gave me a hard time because I employed the Ornstein Smo strat of waiting for the big guy to barrel past me and then go for the small nimble one. This didn't work out anywhere near as well in this fight, so I decided to bait Ariandel's attacks, roll right behind him as the attacks ended, and just wail on him, dodging out of any follow-ups he might try to smack me with or any of Fried's attempts to try and gank me. With a little patience and greed management, this phase was over and I breathed a sigh of relief as the two collapsed on the floor and I was rewarded with a Titanite slab. Of course, I was foolish to think myself victorious, because as Ariandel uttered the words, as Sister Fried rose up from the ground wreathed in black flame, I knew it was time to lube up because I was about to get screwed hard and repeatedly. And to no surprise, I was. Thinking Phase 2 is the end of the fight, I had already embered and used all of my flasks and had maybe half of my health left, and Fried utterly demolished me with her opening moves as I sat there dumbfounded, my jaw hitting the floor, unable to believe what was happening. This fight went into the next day for me as I finally, sloppily got her down and was relieved that I never had to do that fight again. That mindset changed, however, when I went back to use the bonfire in her boss room to access the Ring of City DLC and actually managed to one-shot her. I was completely dumbfounded at how I managed to do that, but there's just something about beating a really hard boss once that makes the next attempt much easier. And after returning to Fried several times, despite saying I would always hate this fight, I've now grown to love it, and it is now one of my favorite boss fights in the entire series. Fuck this dragon. Yeah, no sweet intro for this guy. Fuck this dragon. Dark Eater Meteor managed to top my levels of frustration over Sister Fried, something I never thought possible. But you know what I absolutely love? Battling with the camera worse than any boss in Souls by a country fucking mile, getting fried by what seems like a seemingly unavoidable flame breath, a tail swipe from behind him trying to heal, getting staggered by one hit of dark magic just to get finished by the dragon's claws, it's all wonderful. Okay, salt aside, Meteor is in my opinion an example of an extremely well done dragon fight. He has a reasonably trackable tells, open windows to counterattack if you know how to position yourself, and the tankiest health bar of all time to make sure you're playing skillfully, not just getting lucky with a few dodges and bursting him down. For that, I'll respect Meteor as a fantastic dragon fight, but I hate fighting dragons and large beasts that create nightmares with the camera, so for that and the aforementioned reasons, Meteor lands himself in the position of the most difficult boss in my entire journey throughout the Souls series. Thank you guys for watching, give it a like if you like, and tell me what bosses you struggled out in Dark Souls 3, or any bosses in the Souls series. Maybe we could even talk about Bloodborne. I haven't played Bloodborne yet, but I really do want to. Hopefully it comes to the PC. Alright, that's all for me today. Until you guys see me again, live well.